every smart board or whatever it is that comes through the system. And thirdly, we had a little bit of room in the PPS budget based on the fact we try to create a tuition budget that anticipates unknowns. And so I believe in the budget, while as difficult it is to predict, we tend to try to build in some extra tuition. So some of the funds will come from that area as well.
Any other questions or comments? One question, Carl, on now where is the state with circuit breaker right now? Are they at 50%, 40%? What?
42, I think. At this
Now
point.
that's down from
75.
75. So that's another area where we're not going to be able to make it up, obviously.
No, that number's fixed. That's not going to change this year. When we talk later about our first look at the FY12 budget, we'll talk more about circuit breaker. But you can see the challenge you have in creating special ed budgets. Here we are in November, and we're dealing with FY11 issues. So as we begin to talk about FY12, you move out. The farther you move out, the more inexact it gets.
But these costs have an impact on FY12.
Correct, because they'll be there in
That's correct.
FY12,
We
either
carry
one
these
way,
costs
either in
forward.
district or out of district, we
That's
carry
correct.
that forward.
That's
So.
correct. So we'll turn the heat down, gotta conserve on the utilities.
Well, I did want to, we did have, and Patty, I'd like you to stay around for this, we did have a little report later on that Mr. Bowers was going to speak to, but I think it fits right in here, which is one of the resolutions that was passed at the recent mask meeting, and North Reading was one of the sponsors of that resolution, so I don't know if Mr. Bowers wanted to address that at this time.
This came out of our suburban coalition meeting back in the spring. I brought, Framingham was going to sponsor this resolution and asked us if we would co-sponsor it. They needed 5 different regions to get in on that. And we represented a different one, obviously, than Framingham. So we signed on to that. And the resolution is to have MASC file legislation that would have the effect of modifying the circuit breaker, principally to encourage school districts to create programs to keep students in district. And the modification would be that the state would pay 75% of any expenses exceeding 2 times the average student cost for students housed in a collaborative program, and 75% of the expenses exceeding 1 time on what the rest of the body, student body had, for all students housed in an in-district program. So if we had that in place, then that would provide us with a very substantial incentive and assistance in keeping kids in district. And that would be good for them and good for us all, and good for the community.
Not only that, it would reward us for
Building
being,
programs.
having initiatives that we already have in place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if you're funding that at 20% of what you should, then it really isn't so
Right.
meaningful. But and this has a long way to go. It's filing legislation. It still has to get through the process and through the governor. But it was resolution 1 out of the session at MASC. So that's a positive,
Right.
positive thing.
I think now, the circuit breaker today, Carl, does it only cover out-of-district tuition costs?
No, it covers, what you do is you develop the foundation, it's called the foundation.
The foundation amount, which
Right.
is $38,600 and some odd dollars. So if a student
Right.
being provided services within district, if we review their service delivery grid, and that each of those components has a dollar amount, and then there are some students in district being services in district that are over above that threshold, so they would be a circuit breaker reimbursement.
But as Mr. Bowers pointed out, you can see that's almost 4 times what our per pupil cost is for the regular student body. Whereas if you get it down to 2 times, then that would significantly increase money we got from the state. Now, I don't know where the state's gonna get that money, but I think it's a really good idea.
But this is very serious money that
Right.
is in this resolution, and again, that may be a constraint on how fast it moves through the legislature. But if it did pass through the legislature, it would be very, very helpful to
It would, if I
all
could
of the
add,
programs.
Our out-of-district our students enrolled in out-of-district placements, I don't have the numbers here, but I would, 2/3 are in collaboratives rather than private day placements. So that would be something that North Reading would absolutely benefit financially from.
And to give you some perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, Patty, I believe there's 40-something students enrolled out of district.
That number's a little bit lower right now, but
Okay, 38,
But you're right, around
37,
40.
somewhere in there. So, in effect, what Circuit Breaker does is pays for 42% of the costs over $38,000 of any student. And there are, by and large, it involves the out-of-district placements.
But that's real, I mean, I know that can be substantial in some cases, but 42% of, if we're paying 50,000 for somebody, then that's what? 12,000, 42, it's like $5,000 out of a $50,000 tuition. And now, does it cover transportation also, or is it just, it does? It does cover transportation. That's good. And what is the total number of students either out of district or who have IEPs? Is it around 400 or it's around 400?
a little bit over
And
that.
that's, I'm assuming for a town, a district of our type of district, our kind of town we are, that's pretty average, or?
What's that percentage? Because
So
2,500, 12%?
You can go online and find that statistic, by the way, what percentage.
For other
of-
towns?
You'll see
Yeah.
North Reading versus other area communities, and you'll find that we are not,
When,
we're right in the ballpark.
And that's the DESE website?
Yes, I say that because from time to time, people suggest that perhaps North Reading programs are so strong that people want to move to our community. While I'd like to think they are strong, there's no evidence that our funding costs are caused or inflated by that fact.
Well, I think-
It's not that easy for people just to decide to move to North Reading either, right?
Right.
So that, you know,
There's other costs associated with
Yeah.
that, with the cost of housing. Well, Mr. Bowers will keep on top of this, and anything we can do to push this legislation forward. And if we can use your help, or, Carl's or Kathy or whomever else, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Patty?
thank you.
Nope. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
This would be a good thing for Stand for Children to stand for.
Absolutely. It's a very good thing. Stand for Children and NRU. Okay, let's get back to the agenda. We'll get back to continued business, and we have an MSBA SSBC update. Kathy?
Thank you. The fully executed feasibility study agreement was sent to the district on November 16th, 2010, so we are now officially in partnership with the MSBA for our building project. The training for the progress payment system took place at the MSBA on Friday, November 12th at 1:30 p.m., and those in attendance included the town administrator, two of the secondary school building committee members who will be reviewing all invoices that come in through the project, and me. So we attended the training, and it was very interesting. So I think we have a really good understanding of how ProPay works now. The voluntary information meeting and walkthrough for the OPM applicants took place at the high school on Wednesday, November 17th at 9:30 a.m. And those that conducted the tour included Chuck Carucci, Wayne Hardacre, Cliff Bowers, and John Bernard. There were 7 applicants that participated on the tour. The selection schedule for the hiring of the OPM has been included in your packet so that you could see what was taking place over the next few weeks.
Could you just, for the public, explain just briefly what the OPM does, so?
Sure. The OPM is the owner's project manager. And the owner's project manager is the person that will be in charge of all of the activities that are conducted through the feasibility study, and they actually oversee the project. Used to be called the clerk of the works. And very often, the clerk of the works was hired later on in the process. Through the revisions of what takes place through the MSBA now, you need to hire the OPM even before you begin your feasibility study. It's the first action that you take
Okay.
as you go through now your feasibility study agreement. And they oversee the project, and they are really very helpful in advising the owners of next steps in the process.
Yeah, and unlike the clerk of the works, I think the OPM in this case could be made up of a team or a staff or even
Correct.
somebody that has the resources to put the project together. So it may not be just an individual, but it may be an individual that has some type of support services in order to go forward with this. Am I
That's an
correct?
excellent point, Jerry,
Right.
yes. Cliff, did you want to add anything else about the walkthroughs? You were there?
No, it was just basically a tour through all the facilities, showing them small spaces, the deteriorated spaces, the cubbies here and there that are part of the issue. And it was pretty obvious that facilities need to be modified. There wasn't anything particular added. I think there were only 2 questions, one on date confirmation, and another on the number of copies of whether something was included in the number, whether the attachments were a part of the 20-page count in the main text. And so we answered those. The people that were there seemed to be appropriate, and looking forward to day after tomorrow when we get the packets from them and start working on them.
Now, does the OPM conduct the feasibility study?
No,
They don't.
no, they are our agent in it. The feasibility study is going to be done by the architect.
Okay.
Engineers, architects.
Which we'll have to hire after the OPM.
With
Okay.
connections from Mass Building Authority, the town, the OPM. There'll be a lot of input to it
Okay.
along the way, but it's basically the architect's job to pull that together.
I mean, the difference is, Mel, too, that the clerk of the works wasn't hired till we actually started construction in the
Right.
past, so they oversaw the construction process, but this is with, they being involved much, much sooner, and they have to be, under the new process.
Basically, what happened is that MASB decided that they didn't want to deal with amateurs. They wanted to deal with professionals.
Right.
So they want you to hire the professional right up front and have them work with you, and then they're dealing with a professional on this side. That's really what it's about, and it's an appropriate thing to have in this case.
I think the important thing is though it's really real now because we actually have applications coming in, we're having tours, and we'll be selecting that OPM. What's the timetable?
Very soon. Well, we have 27 requests for a copy of the OPM RFS.
Okay.
So everything closes on November 24th. And on November 29th, the selection committee, and this is part of your selection schedule, November 29th, the selection committee, the subcommittee of the SSBC will shortlist the respondents. There's a whole process that they need to go through in order to do that.
And that sounds like it's a long time between the 24th and the 29th.
No.
But you might remember that the 24th is the day before Thanksgiving, and the 29th is the Monday after Thanksgiving.
That's
Uh,
good. That's very good.
So they'll be taking a look at all of those applications that have come in. And then from November 29th to December 7th, once we have identified the shortlist, we need to do reference checks on all of the shortlisted applicants prior to the interview on December 7th. So December 7th, there will be the interviews of the shortlisted respondents. The selection committee will be very involved. There'll be 2 to 3 that will be interviewed based on the work of the shortlisting. And the selection committee will interview, but the rest of the SSBC will be in attendance to observe the process.
And the
then
school
there'll be-
committee's welcome to attend as
And the
well.
school committee is welcome
They
to
wanna be there.
attend. And then we hope to be able to negotiate with the selected respondent on or about December 10th and submit that name on or about December 13th to the MSBA. We still do not know what the schedule for the MSBA OPM review panel is for 2011. And so our remaining 2 dates, January 3rd and 4th, are very much dependent upon the review panel because everything is approved by the MSBA before we move forward. So they actually have to approve
Yep.
the OPM that has been selected as the finalist for North Reading.
So once the OPM is done, then we move to hiring the design firm,
Correct.
The architect.
the architect, and